All right, so Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Good morning. So I just wanted to talk about some changes that we're going to make, that we already have made. It seems like we have almost like a complete changeover from last week to this week. Completely different people. So we started Kehilat Yeshua about 4 years ago, Judy and I, and it's really been awesome. Like we've enjoyed this process. We're grateful that God has put us into this place and been able to meet a lot of wonderful people. But it's I also work a full-time job, and it's been a lot harder than we expected it to be. Last week I said, like when we first started, I told you, I was like, well, if all you got to do is preach once a week, that's like 2 or 3 hours a week max, and you're done. Like, it's easy. And I didn't realize everything else that went into it. I was fairly naive at the time. So anyway, long story short, it's kind of taken a toll, like this whole like double working and having family and all that kind of stuff. So we've kind of gotten burned out. So what we're doing to kind of help alleviate that a little bit is we're changing our service structure around somewhat for a period of time. So between now and probably till the other side of the fall holidays, we're changing the format of our services where we're going to come and everything up to this point is going to be the same. There's not really a lot of change there, but instead of having somebody come and give a quick Josh teaching and then going on with worship and a message, we're going to all come together and discuss the weekly Parsha during this point. So we're going to go over what the word is, and we're just going to discuss. And we'll have somebody, usually a child, run around with a microphone and give it to you so everybody can hear. And we'll just have some dialogue, right? Just discuss the word of the Lord, and then we'll move into worship. And sometimes we'll have prayer time. And then as long as we can have good help with cleaning the facility afterwards, we'll keep doing oneg and all that. So, something I didn't say last week that I meant to say, and I'd like to make mention of this week, is that in doing this, we're not trying to step back from Kehilat or in any way signify that that we're less committed or anything like that. We're actually doing this out of our commitment to Kehilat Yeshua because we want to, like our perspective is a long-term perspective. In 20 years and 30 years, we still want to be here doing this. And so we recognize that this is a marathon and not a sprint. So we're making these changes for a little while, and hopefully during this time, I can tell you that already in the last week or so, it's been more refreshing for me. So anyway, we're doing that. We're also canceling pretty much any other like extra activities, including like Avodah and any other nights like that. And unfortunately, it also means the camping trip and the immersions that we were going to do. But anyway, but we know that God has called us to do this, and we are doing it to the best of our ability, and we're doing it in a way that we can keep doing it to the best of our ability. So anyway, so that's the quick announcement and fairly big change. So let's go ahead and open our Bibles to Deuteronomy chapter 3 for Parsha Ve'chanan. All right. And do I have a child who would like to, like, at least you? Okay, well, he already knows what I'm going to say. All right, you were here last week. Okay, so, all right, come here. You can do it. All right, so if you have something that you would like to say, comment you'd like to make, question you want to pose to us, go ahead and raise your hand, and Judah and or the next runner will bring you the mic. So we're going to start with chapter 3, verse 23, and we'll be taking turns. We'll be what we'll do is we'll take turns reading, and if you would like to read the next section when it comes time, just raise your hand, and our runner will bring you the microphone. So one thing I actually do want to say is, while I'm not doing a message or whatever, if you would normally call us during the week and say, like, want to talk about something or whatever, by all means, we're not stopping that. Right? We're still the pastors here. We're still like, we want to be helpful and aid in whatever way possible. So I just wanted to make mention, just in case anybody was wondering, hey, what does this mean? Anyway, okay. So I'll go ahead and do the first reading. So Devarim, Deuteronomy chapter 3, starting verse 23. This is Moses saying, he says, "Then I pleaded with Adonai, Adonai Elohim, Lord God, you have begun to reveal your greatness to your servants and your strong hand. For what other God is there in heaven or on earth that can do the works and mighty deeds that you do? Please, let me go across and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that wonderful hill country and Lebanon." But Adonai was angry with me on account of you, and he didn't listen to me. Adonai said to me, "Enough from you. Don't say another word to me about this matter. Climb up to the top of Pisgah and look out to the west, north, south, and east. Look with your eyes, but you will not go across this Jordan. However, commission Joshua, encourage him and strengthen him, for he will lead this people across and enable them to inherit the land that you will see." So he stayed in the valley across from Beit Peor. All right. So before we get in, does anybody not have a Bible that would like to have a Bible? We have extras. We have some here. All right. You have a Bible. Good. All right. How many do we need over there? Just one or two? All right. Why don't you take one and give the other one to Tirza? All right. All right, so here we have Moses, recounting. This is why he can't go into the land. Do we have any thoughts on this section? Thank you. No? Pretty self-explanatory. Feel good about this? Moving on? All right.
I just had a thought about just the fact that Moshe, asked and wanted to go into the promised land, and God said no. And I'm just thinking of desires or goals we would like to have in our own lives, and the times that God has said no, and that is hard for us to accept. And yet, it was God's will. And, I'm thinking that must have been a tough thing for him.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and this is Moses, right? Moses has changed God's mind on a few occasions, right? And so that's one of the things that is interesting to me about this, is that it seems like if anybody can change God's mind, it would be Moses. And he says, "I pleaded with the Lord," and then God, it's like this parent response, right? Just stop, right? Don't ask me about this anymore. We're done. Just drop the subject. And so I think that's interesting, and I think I'm wondering, when the times that we see Moses changing God's mind, it's never, "Oh Lord, bless me," right? "Oh Lord, do something for me." Right? It's like, "God, what about you? What about your name? What about your people?" Right? What is the rest of the world going to say about you? They're going to say you aren't strong enough to bring your people. And so I think that's I think that dynamic is something that's really interesting to me, that this, I don't want to call Moses selfish because, if, you know, but like,
But you see it as more of an individual request instead of a request on the behalf of the people
yeah,
of Israel, right?
yeah, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but somebody said once, if you pray to God for a brand new car, He probably won't give it to you, but if you pray for somebody else for a brand new car, they might get it, right? Like, anyway, that's, yeah.
So also
So I'll pray for you for a car. You pray for me.
this it's always I don't know if bothered me is the right term, but Moses dedicated 80 years of his life, well, 40 years of preparation and then another 40 years of leading these people. And I think that this shows the weight of leadership, of making decisions. And Moses made a decision that was a bad decision, and he was punished for it, and his punishment was pretty severe. I mean, you look at the big picture, and he spent 40 years doing what God had told him to do. He did one thing that God said not to do, and he doesn't get the payoff at the end of the 40 years. I mean, this is the ultimate, this is the goal that they're working towards, and he doesn't get it because of that one decision. And it's a very sobering thing that that he did that, and then the consequence was so great.
Yeah. That's a good point. Ken.
Is this on?
No, there we go.
It's almost like he's pleading. You're like, oh, come on. Can't we just, work it out, what I did back then? No. So I look at my life, and there's a couple things I regret. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's because, this happened because of that happened. I don't know. But he requires obedience rather than sacrifice, right? So important.
Mm-hmm.
And the very thing that Moses wanted the most, he didn't get. I mean, he worked all that time.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that's got to be tough,
Yeah.
So I would just, encourage obedience. Because who knows what that one thing is. I know, God doesn't have his thumb on us and, I'm just waiting to squish you. It's not like that. Mm-hmm. But there are consequences. And I look back at my life, I'm thinking, maybe it could have been a little better or something, or, I don't know. I guess we all look that way, when you get older. So, this is a real sobering piece.
Yeah, it kind of, to me, it speaks a little bit to the idea of grace and forgiveness versus consequences, too. Right? It's not as if God was still holding this against Moses, and because I'm still upset with you, you can't go. I think that God probably has forgiven Moses for this by this point, but it still remains that sometimes there are consequences to our actions that have nothing to do with being forgiven or unforgiven or being shown a certain amount of grace, whatever. It's just, well, you did this, and here's the consequence. And there's, at that point, there's, maybe something is, already been forgiven, but there's still the consequence to deal with.
The thing I think with Moses and why it was such a strict thing, I think, is because Moses was the representation of God. It wasn't like he wasn't disobedient, really, but he did it wrong. And because of that, that's why God said, hey, you can't go in. Because he was supposed to be the representation to the people. And he didn't do it right, And so what he really did is he showed an aspect of God that wasn't there. Does that make sense? Because he hit the rock. It was in anger. God wasn't angry. You know, they really did do wrong. They had a legitimate complaint. Hey, we need water.
Right.
Right? And that was the thing. And so there was a misrepresentation there. And I think that's what God says. Hey, you're the leader. You're talking for me, and you didn't do it right.
Right.
You know, and I think that's why Moses wasn't. And which says a lot to us. If we're in any kind of leadership, even like a head of the family, we're representing God, and that's really important. You know, it's not just obedience is top. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying there's reasons why. It's not just because we're disobedient or obedient. Because Moses, when you look at it, he did everything, you know, I mean, he was there, right? But this one instant, he was not doing it right.
Yeah. That's a weighty thing. All right. All right, so let's read. Let's go ahead and, who wants to read chapter 4? We'll do verses 1 through 9.
Now, O Israel, listen to the statutes. What?
Keep going.
Wasn't yelling. The statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to do, so that you may live and go in the possesses the land of Adonai, the God of your fathers, is giving you. You must not add to the word that I am commanding you, or take away from it, in order to keep the mitzvot of Adonai, your God, that I am commanding you. Your eyes have seen what Adonai did at Baal Peor. For Adonai your God has destroyed from among you everyone who followed Baal Peor. But you who had held tight to Adonai your God are alive today, all of you. See, just as Adonai my God commanded me, I have taught you statutes and ordinances to do in the land that you are about to enter to possess. You must keep and do them, for it is your wisdom and understanding in the eyes of the peoples, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that God's so near to them as Adonai our God is whenever we call on him? What great nations is there that has statutes and ordinances that are righteous, like all of this Torah that I am setting before you today? Can you tell me to do it? Only be watchful and watch over your soul closely, so you do not forget the things your eyes have seen and they slip from your heart all the days of your life. You are to make them known to your children and your children's children.
All right. So he says, listen. Listen, do, live, and here's some reasons why. Any thoughts? I think it's interesting. He says that you're still alive here today, right? At some point, he says, you agreed to this. It wasn't your father's. It was you, and you're alive now because you listened and you obeyed. You have any other thoughts? Judah.
Rabbi, these words are words of reproach and words of warning from Moses, who can't go into the land of promise. And he's warning the children that you will go in, and you must beware for yourselves, because don't goof up like I goofed up. Don't take a small commandment and throw it away, or a light commandment and forget about it. Be careful to observe all these decrees and all these ordinances. So it's his last chance. This is the 11th month of the 40th year. Within 1 month, he will be dead. So it's his last chance. And so every word he speaks is warning them, don't do what I did. So that's why he's being so stern here, and so I'm going to have to say cut and dried in a way that you must obey all of these commandments. Jesus said, I have not come to do away with these laws, but to fulfill them. Yet unless you are more righteous than the Sadducees and Pharisees, you will be the least in heaven. So walking out our faith is a big deal, and it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week thing. And we must guard ourselves and guard the law that we're given and guard the relationship we have with Yeshua so that we can see the promised land. Thank you.
Well, I think it's also important that it's not just about doing. Right? In Hebrews 4, it says that they all died because they didn't receive the word with faith, and they didn't mix faith with their actions, right? And so it's doing, but as we go on in Deuteronomy, God talks a lot about a heart in Deuteronomy. Moses talks about the heart quite a bit. That this is yes to do and obey, but also it's not just out of rote obedience, right? Like it's out of a heart that is right before God. And I want to honor God. I want to do what He says. I want to follow in His ways. And I'm doing these things not just out of obedience, but out of a heart of faith, and saying, God, I trust in you that when I do this, that your word is true and that you're faithful, and yeah.
I really appreciate the idea that even though the parents died in the wilderness because they refused to go in, that in my mind, the parents, they realized they're wrong, even though they were slaves in Egypt and they had that mindset, and it was really hard for that to get out of them, even through all of their wanderings and even through everything that the Lord had done for them. I have to believe that they still taught their children. Like they were like, look, don't be like us. Don't, miss out on all the good that God had like we did, go on. And so their parents' ceiling were the children's floor. And that gives me encouragement for the mistakes that I've made as a parent and things that I know I've missed out on and consequences I've had to walk through. And you really can't go back, but you can go forward, and you can teach your children and from your own mistakes and pray for them and hope for them and encourage them to go into the promised land, to continue and seek out and fulfill their calling that the Lord has for them. So I really just appreciate that whole story, because God was faithful to even the ones that refused to go in and blessed their children. So that was just something I noticed.
Yeah, that's good. Gina. Ken. Thanks.
This part's all about obeying God's commandments. And in the world that we're going to be facing, that we are facing, is the same situation. Because in Revelation 12 it says, those who obey God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. That's who the dragon comes against. So we need to obey God's commandments if we're going to overcome.
Yeah. Something that sticks out to me is verse 2, also, where he says, you shall not add to the word which I command you, nor take away, right, that you may keep the commandments of the Lord your God which I command you. It's very interesting. So we have several places through here and in Deuteronomy and in Exodus and in Joshua where it says that Moses wrote down everything that God said. Like everything that God said was written down, and that he had fully communicated this to Joshua, and it was do everything that was written. Do everything that was written. Anyway, it's interesting that Moses' warning was against even not just taking away from the commandments, but also adding it onto it. And it kind of reminds me of Yeshua talking to the Pharisees, that you lay burdens on men that are too heavy to bear, and you don't lift a finger to do it, right? And so, anyway, that was something that stuck out to me. How about, verse 6, it says, therefore be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples, who shall surely hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what great nation is there that has God so near as the Lord our God is to us, for whatever reason we may call upon him? And what great nation is there that has such statutes and righteous judgments as are in all this law which I set before you today? It's interesting. He starts off and he says, this is a testimony. This is a testament to the nations around you, that for them to see how wise and understanding or discerning this people is, right? Like, this isn't. It's the thing that's interesting to me. One of the things that's interesting is that this is a worldly standard, right? Where they look at Israel and they're not just like, oh man, that people is so spiritual, right? But man, by our own standards, this is an amazingly wise and understanding people. Like, who came up with this stuff, right? And that this was a testament to their God, and how does this, when we're out in the workplace, when we're out, in the world today, is this what people say about us, right? Surely, Dennis is so wise and understanding. Like, where does he get this stuff? Or, Dimitri, Ken, like, why are these guys so wise? And where do they get this information? This is something I don't think that was meant to pass away, right? And then the next thing he says is, for what great nation is there has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us? For whatever reason when we call on him, like what other people has a God who answers them? right? Who's near. When we have a need, when we cry out, that He shows up. And God talks in a few places, call on me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you, right? I will answer you. And this is something that's always been this way with God and His people, that, hey, I'm the God who sees, I'm the God who hears, I'm the God who acts. I'm the living God. And then He talks about the statutes and righteous judgments, right? Like this is the third thing is it's not like the first part isn't that it's they're wonderful statutes and it's a righteous law, right? But like it's definitely part of it. But he says that the testimony to nations around and the showing that God is near, these are the primary and secondary reasons, and this is a law that's righteous. That doing it is righteousness. We've had this focus today, this morning, right, of doing. Like God has given this Torah to us, not just to learn about it, not just to talk about it, not just to have a head knowledge, but to walk it out. And in that walking out, there's righteousness. Right? And then he goes on to take heed that you diligently keep yourself so that you don't forget what you've seen, what you've heard, what you've experienced, these words that I've given to you. Any other thoughts?
I think it's a plea by Moses here that we should learn from other people's examples, right? A lot of times in our lives, we don't learn until something has happened to us, and then we go, well, I remember so-and-so telling me, and this is exactly what happened, and now I suffer the consequences. Why not listen to what is said? And this is Moses' last plea, saying the little things, the little commandments, the little God is fair, God is good, He has righteous commandments, He's close to you. Why not obey what He says? Don't get burnt on what I got burnt on.
Yeah.
At the same time, this is his last plea, and listen to the mistakes of others so you don't have to make your own.
Yeah, sharing wisdom, right? Knowledge is when you learn from your own mistakes, and wisdom is when you learn from other people's. All right, so anything else before we move on? That was good. All right, so let's read verse 10. Let's do 10 through 20. Who wants to read? Okay. Good. Oh, all right.
10 through what?
20.
The day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, the Lord said to me, "Assemble the people before me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me all the days they live on the earth, and may instruct their children. You came near and stood at the base of the mountain, a mountain blazing with fire into the heavens and enveloped in a totally black cloud. Then the Lord spoke to you from the fire. You kept hearing the sound of the words, but didn't see a form. There was only a voice. He declared his covenant to you. He commanded you to follow the 10 commandments which he wrote on 2 stone tablets. At that time the Lord commanded me to teach you statutes and ordinances for you to follow in the land you are about to cross into and possess. Diligently watch yourselves, because you did not see any form on the day the Lord spoke to you out of the fire at Horeb, so you don't act corruptly and make an idol for yourselves in the shape of any figure, a male or female form, or the form of any animal on the earth, any winged creature that flies in the sky, any creature that crawls on the ground, or any fish in the waters under the earth. When you look to the heavens and see the sun, moon, and stars, all the stars in the sky, do not be led astray to bow and worship to them and serve them. The Lord your God has provided them for all people everywhere under heaven. But the Lord selected you and brought you out of Egypt's iron furnace, to be a people for his inheritance as you are today.
Any thoughts?
This is exactly what Baphomet is.
What?
Baphomet, the goat head with the figure and the fish and the stars. It's what the pagans worship. It's exactly what they were, it's exactly opposite what they're supposed to do. Pagan worship. The fish, the head, the man, the woman, the stars, animal, earth. Anything but God. Baphomet, that's the goat-headed person thing.
It's interesting in verse 19 that God says that he's appointed a lot of these for all the other nations, but not you. Right? It's interesting. He doesn't say, "Oh, that's pooey," right? Like he doesn't say that doing things that way has no effect or it's powerless. He says, "No, that is not something for you. Right? That is something for like I think that can put it well, like the pagans to do, but not for my people. Right? My people look to me for their answers. My people look to me. I'm the God that's close, right? I'm the God that answers when you call, and you don't need divination. You don't need astrology. You have me, and it's interesting that he doesn't say, like I said, it's that all that is powerless, but he says, I'm your source. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am the creator of the universe. And this is how you are to act. This is how my people should act.
So the God said, don't do anything like represent me, right? Because you didn't see my face or the way it looks, only you've been hearing only voice. So what about these days with the Yeshua, that people are worship, they kind of make his image, and like Orthodox and Catholic, and they kind of see his image, but Yeshua was in flesh. Yeah. So what's the border here? It's just more like a question.
Yeah, so I would say those things are unbiblical, like pretty plainly. And I think, I think it's interesting because there's an email I got earlier this week that was talking about, here, buy these things from us. It was actually from a messianic organization. So buy these things from us and make us altar in your home. And it was like a Bible and menorah and a few other things. I think maybe they had a mezuzah and all this. I don't remember everything that was in this package, right? And the thought occurred to me that we have things that represent God or represent aspects of God to us, right? Like one of the primary things that we have that represents God to us is His Word, right? This is like very important. If we don't have this, it's like you don't have anything. Like God and his word are inseparable. But he didn't say not to study his word, but he says don't worship anything that's not me, right? Don't worship a representation of me. And I think that that's one of the issues here, is that also when pagans create an idol or an image, the idea is that idol or that image is kind of a gateway to that supposed God, right? To that demon. And so it's also a physical representation, right? And God is near to us, right? He just said that we have a God that is so near to us. Whenever we call on him, like we don't need this representation, because we have his Spirit, we have his presence. He makes himself known to us, and he can speak to us. Like there's lots of ways that God speaks to us. The very first, primary, biggest way is through his word. And so I think that people who are worshiping God sometimes kind of get off a little bit, right? And so I think that when we see that, I think that the difficult thing is to it can be to sit there and to continue to show them love, instead of coming and saying, well, you're a sinner, and God is rejecting you because of this and all this. Like, maybe God is, I don't know. I'm not, but the thing is, I'm not the judge. But we have God's word that says don't do that. So we can say, look, I want to show you this. I just want to make you aware. The word of God says this, and we're not necessarily responsible for their actions, but if we have a relationship with them, especially, we can, in love, show them, like, hey, just want to make you aware that God says this, and I'll let you, it's the Holy Spirit's job to convict the world of sin and righteousness and judgment. And so we say, here's what the Word of God says. Why don't you pray about it and see if God's speaking anything to you through this, right? We're God. I think it's yeah. Anyway, Joy.
Just to add to that, the whole do not make an image, because when I spoke to you, you didn't see any form. And to me, it seems like God is saying, don't have an agenda when you come to me. Don't, the pagans, when they made those images, they could control the thing. They felt like they could, or believed they could control the things in their lives through this image and manipulating the gods. And, if I do this for this god, then maybe I'll have good crops or whatever. And it seems like an issue of control, where when we come before the Lord, he's the one who's in control. He's the one who decides how things are and how we should be. And, by trusting him and believing him to the point where we walk in his ways and we make it a matter of our life, then we're trusting that he knows his ways are higher than ours. And, we don't have to control things, because we can trust that he is ultimately in control, and we can trust that he's good and he's powerful, and he knows what he's doing, and we don't have to control our lives in that way. And so not making an image or some kind of idea out of how we think things should be, I think kind of goes along with that, that just trusting, okay, we don't understand why God does some of the things he does, or why he tells us to do some of the things. I mean, and he doesn't really explain himself either. But it's intriguing, and it's mysterious, and it's fun to search those things out. And when you do get revelation from him, it's an amazing, intimate part of the relationship that we can have with the Lord, when we don't come to things with these preconceived ideas and an agenda, and saying things have to be this way because this is how I feel or think. So anyway.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good point, that God's not made in our image, right? We're made in His. And there's a part of a book I read, it's been months ago, maybe a year or more now, and the author was making the point that if your God is just like you have things flipped around, right? If your God is conservative or liberal or pro or con, or against all these things that just happen to be everything that you are pro or against, or if you're conservative or you're liberal, like the idea being that that we have this tendency as people to, like you said, I think that was a really good point, that of trying to control things, right? And this kind of goes back a little bit to Moses' request, right? Moses was pleading. He says, I pleaded with God, and God didn't do what I asked. And sometimes it's going to happen, but at the same time, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purposes. And it doesn't say all things work together for fun for those who love God and are called according to His purposes. It says for good. And in Hebrews it says that God disciplines those who He loves, and all discipline is unpleasant, we'll say, right? While it's happening, but in the end it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. And we've talked a lot about Job here. Like Job, Job is a lot more righteous than me. I'm just going to say that. Like I don't think that I could have gone through what Job went through without having another Job to look at previously and come out the way that he did, right? And so it worked together for Job's good, but it also worked together for our good. And I think that's something that we should consider, that when we're going through difficult times, when we're struggling, when whatever is happening, we don't know who's watching, right? And maybe it's not about us at all, and that this difficulty is happening because God wants to show Himself strong and faithful to somebody else who's watching and see how we react, because I think maybe Bud said something about like we represent God. We're like in various circles, right? In various situations. And so if we're representing Him well, then He'll be glorified, and people will see the wise and discerning nature, and He'll be exalted. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect. Anything else in this section? I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time. So, Matt.
Yeah, kind of tagging on with what you're saying, the last verse where he talks about him bringing us out of the iron smelting furnace out of Egypt. God first loved us. Why do we not make it? It's not our image of Him that we need to make. We need to be conformed to His image. Right. Because He first loved us. He brought us out of Egypt. And if you think of Egypt as that metaphor for sin in our lives, I mean, He's the one who redeemed us. He's the one that called us. Why do we follow his laws or His commands? Because He's changing us into His image. He's conforming us to an image. It's like our minds are being transformed. Yeah. And our hearts are being transformed in that process. And I think that it's because of His love for us that we are saved. And, it's just nothing that we've done. It's because He loved us.
Man, that's good. Let's go ahead and stand. That was good.